I'm Torstraman at Tharanki Ramacharaka. Thank you for selecting this, I don't know, is it number 12? Video number 12 in my series, High Order Thinking in Axiomatic Metaphor. Before I continue, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, take the time to do it right now. Activate the notification bell feature while you're at it. Share the joy of the channels. You can start by giving this video a thumb up. Comment courteously below. And now moving on. In the immediately prior video, the one preceding this one, we arrived at, finally, our first, for use, axiomatic metaphorical statement for personal involvement. We'll make an exercise out of it. All right, because we have steps to follow. You should know that by now. That first one is, what is it again? Oh, but wait. Before we continue with that, before we answer that question, what are the three things to bear in mind all the while? Remember the general fact, the general rule, and the general technique? Okay. I said, see to it that you do. So what are they? All the universe is alive. Treat all parts of your interaction in this project here as attention training tools. And to do that by applying the general technique, place your attention on the meanings of the words that you're working with to the point of feeling those meanings. All right? The fact, the rule, the technique, and our first axiomatic metaphorical statement is, remember, as all men know, if a coconut drops on your head, there stands a good chance that you barked up the wrong tree. Okay. Before we work through each step here, and there are 10 of them, together, I want to tell you what all 10 are. Then we'll take them one at a time. Here they are. Then we're going to move on to the next video and get going with the first one. But I want you to have a heads up where we're going with this. Here are the steps to take for each provided axiomatic metaphorical statement in this entire regime with which you have been instructed to have fun. Number one, read or listen to the given statement. Number two, determine the truth value of the statement when its meaning is taken literally, or low-order thinking applied to it. Is it definitely true? Is it possibly true? Is it probably untrue? Is it definitely not true? Number three, decide whether the metaphorical aspect of the statement is directly stated, such as is in sex is war. Is it just a simple, outright metaphor? Or is it left up to you to figure out? Such as is in people who live in glass houses shouldn't. There's been more high-order thinking involved there than there was in sex is war. Remember I talked about layers of complexity? An added layer of complexity with statements such as people who live in glass houses shouldn't, because we're only given half the metaphor, really. In sex is war, we're given the whole thing. We're calling one thing another, and we know what the one thing is, and we know what the other is. Sex is war. All right. Decide whether this is a full metaphor or only half of one, or how many layers of complexity there are to getting to the meaning. of the statement. That's number 3. Number 4, write out, write or print or keyboard, somehow get onto paper, make visual with symbols, language symbols, what you take the statement to refer to generally. That it does not say outrightly. In other words, we're jumping into what's the metaphorical meaning here? What's really being referred to in a metaphorical manner, in the manner of metaphor, calling one thing another. And then relationships among the component parts of the statement, their meanings, wrapped around calling one thing another. Write out what you take the statement to refer to generally, that it doesn't say outrightly. That is, what is it really getting at by way of metaphor? Number 5, come up with at least 3 examples of life affairs to which the metaphor applies. That's a logical next step, isn't it? Well, what's to follow then? Number 6, determine some aspect of creative thinking, conceptual thinking, or other kind of high-level thinking. We've introduced them back in the theory part. Remember? One of the prior videos. We already talked about these, and I named them repeatedly. Kinds of high-level thinking. Okay, well, determine some aspect of creative thinking, conceptual thinking, or other kind of high-level thinking. At least just one of them. Some aspect of one of them. That's all. That has come into play so far in these steps, in your analysis of the statement, the axiomatic metaphorical statement that's at hand right now, to which we are applying these steps. Come up with, number 5 again, come up with at least 3 examples of life affairs to which the metaphor applies. Number 6, determine some aspect of creative thinking, conceptual thinking, abstract thinking, metaphorical thinking, whatever, that has come into play in your analysis so far. And describe to the best of your ability how it has come into play. Now, I mentioned earlier that metaphorical thinking involves combinations of these different kinds of high-order thinking. So, if you're just looking for an aspect of metaphorical thinking to answer this question here, to address number 6, you're probably just repeating what you already did in the first 5 steps. So, I had just mentioned that's an example of a kind of high-order thinking a moment ago, but I try to avoid that one. Go to the ones that comprise metaphorical thinking and comprise other applications as well, but they're higher order thinking. Creative thinking, conceptual thinking, abstract thinking. Right? So just determine some aspect of one of those that has already come into play. It will have. And describe to the best of your ability how it has come into play. Number 7, create your own. Now, axiomatic metaphorical statement that means as closely as possible the same thing that the one given, the original one here, means. You remember I said that in the end, it's all going to be yours. All you're going to get is an axiomatic metaphorical statement to start with. But you're not even going to end up with that one as worded. You'll have come up with one that's just like it, means the same thing, or as closely as possible for yourself. So you're going to end up really with nothing. No direct thing, no immediate thing that anybody gave to you but yourself. going to be all your work. Number 7, again, create your own axiomatic metaphorical statement that means as closely as possible the same as the original one. In this case, what's the original one? As all men know, if a coconut drops on your head, there stands a good chance that you barked up the wrong tree. Number 8, determine some aspect of creative thinking, conceptual thinking, or other kind of high-level thinking that came into play during the immediately previous step. Step 7, creating your own statement. A parallel statement, a semantically parallel statement. In other words, that means as closely as possible what the original one means. You will have had to apply some aspect of some kind of high-level thinking to do that now, to create your own. So determine what it is. Describe to the best of your ability how it came to into play in just that prior step now. All right? Number 9, determine at least one of the following to which your life application of your results from the previous steps, what you've arrived at now, you've written a new axiomatic metaphorical statement. And you've come up with some kind of something about high order thinking that went into doing that. You know what the original one was. You've come up with meaning, right? Determine at least one of the following to which your life application of your results now, where you're at now with this, from the previous steps will work instrumentally. What is it we want to connect all this with? We're not just going into high order thinking here. Remember, we want it to apply to, hopefully in several ways, to connect right in with, interface with, our personal involvement. Remember, these are axiomatic metaphorical statements for personal involvement. And we're going to make them that way several ways. Our primary way is something we do, or you do, with each statement. Every time you go through these 10 steps, this is going to be one of the instructions. Number 9, in fact, determine at least one of these to which your life application, if you were to apply the results of your previous 8 steps, will work instrumentally toward movement away from consciousness hijacking. That's one. Consciousness hijacking, by the way, occurs when some outside influence controls your mental activities against your preferences or against your own best interests. That's consciousness hijacking. Number 2, movement away from perception deception. Again, we want to determine at least one of these from this list now. We now have consciousness hijacking, and we're in the middle of talking about perception deception. That'll be number 2, and there are a couple more. We've already talked about them. We've already introduced them. Now here's where we're going to make these connections and make them real. At least one of the following to which your life application of your results from the previous steps, 1 through 8, will work instrumentally, will assist, will push us toward movement away from consciousness hijacking or movement away from perception deception. Perception deception occurs when your perception of any affairs gets fooled, tricked, manipulated, or spun into accepting and believing an untruth or a skewed version of reality. That's perception deception. The source of perception deception might be yourself or some outside influence. Third, movement. Now we have two movements away from, and remember, we talked about these. Movement away from consciousness hijacking and perception deception, and instead toward, and there were a couple of those, a few. Remember them? Well, first one is movement toward self-mastery. Mastery of self by self. Self-mastery. Or next, toward mental discipline. Or toward personal evolvement. Or personal development, personal betterment. And finally, movement toward, this will be the sixth, to choose from. I'm only asking for one. We're only after one of these six. And I'll reiterate how we're after these, right? Pick one. Find one. Movement toward your true selfhood or your identity. That is, your identity with the unchanging core of your being, your real I, as opposed to your identity with your changing false ego. We're after your identity, movement toward you, more and more identifying with your true ego, the one that remains the same, while all the rest changes. The only part of you, the core of your being, the unchanging core, it does not change. It's the real I within. Movement toward you identifying with that, rather than with you identifying with your changing false ego structure. That notion of me or I that isn't really the real one. All right, that's number 9. You determine at least one of those 6 to which your life application of your results from steps 1 through 8 will push you toward or move you toward. At least if you make it do that. It might do it automatically. Depends on the content, the meaning in the statement itself, the axiomatic statement, right? So there's another way to make this all connect. We can rig these up in a sequence. Every time you come to the next metaphorical statement, axiomatic metaphorical statement, and go through these steps again, it will, by its very content, by its very meaning, move you forward a little bit more toward these 6. These 6 named here in step 9 than the last one did, if they're done sequentially. That'd be another way to go about it, making it happen. But here's how you make it happen. You work it out. And number 10. Activate your new axiomatic metaphorical statement into your life by recalling its meaning and applying it to an actual situation. Implement it. You see, once this is all said and done, these 10 steps, there's nothing there that I gave you, that somebody else created for you. And you will have created your own guideline for better living and applied it. And it will be a living part of your life, if you bear in mind the general fact, the general rule, and the general technique all the while. And it'll feel pretty good if you had fun. In fact, if it feels pretty good, then you'll be having fun. And if you're having fun, it'll feel pretty good. All right. That's how this works. In the next video, we'll take step 1 out of these 10 and we'll work it through with our given axiomatic metaphorical statement, which is what? As all men know, If a coconut drops on your head, there stands a good chance you barked up the wrong tree. Thumb up, share, subscribe, get notified, comment. I'm Turk Strawman at Theron Kurama Chiraka. See you in the next video.